Let's quickly go over the tools we're going to need in this video. The first tool here is a pedal wrench. The second tool here is a 3-prong spanner, otherwise known as Park Tools HCW-5. The next tool is a 32mm and a 36mm spanner, otherwise known as the HCW-15 from Park Tools. A large 300mm heavy-duty crescent wrench, a grease gun, a regular old carpenter's pencil, a Phillips head screwdriver, a hammer, a pair of gloves, and something to use to strap it on. And our good old-fashioned bike stand from Park Tools. If you need any of these tools and you're not sure exactly what to buy, go ahead and check the description right below and I'll direct you to exactly what you need on Amazon. So step number 1, we're going to go around our crank arm and our seat tube. And we're going to snap this strap into place. And this is going to keep our crankset from spinning around while we're trying to take our pedal off here. Otherwise we can get a good whack on the wrist. It doesn't feel very good. So step number 2 involves a pedal wrench. I wouldn't recommend doing this work with anything other than a pedal wrench. You don't have to have the big beefy War Club one that I have. You can have one of the cheap combos like the chain whip or something. There is a groove right here between the pedal and the crank arm. That's where the pedal wrench fits. You're going to grab the drive side crank arm with your left hand, and you're going to take your right hand and you're going to grab the pedal wrench, and you're simply going to turn clockwise to break it, okay? And then you can finish it off by twisting it with your hand. This pedal is actually reverse threaded, and that's why we turn it clockwise. If your bike has been sitting outside or it's been a really long time since you've actually opened this up, you're going to want to use some penetrating oil. And when you put the penetrating oil on, you're going to want to put it on the threads themselves that are attached to the crank arm, not to the actual nut. Because if you do that, you're going to make the nut slippery and it's going to be a pain in the butt. After you put the penetrating oil on, whack your crankset right here with a hammer a few times. Don't try to break anything, but just give it a couple of decent whacks, okay? This is going to send a shock wave through it, and that's going to basically vibrate it and allow the penetrating oil to work its way in. Now that you've let your penetrating oil sit up for a few minutes, there's 2 tools you can use to take the lock nut off. One is a 32mm spanner. The other is just a big old beefy crescent wrench. We're going to go ahead and use our 32mm spanner since we just happen to have one. So we're going to grab our drive side pedal once again. We're going to come over here and we're going to grab only the outer lock nut. Then we turn it clockwise to break it. Once we have it broken with our wrench, we can then do it with our hands. If you grab both of these right here, they both turn the same direction. You're going to see 2. One is for the cone itself, which fits into the cup of the crankset. If you grab both of them though, what will happen is the crankset will actually start to try to work its way this way out, and your strap is going to give you resistance. And you might find yourself unable to turn either way, and that's if you're using this big beefy wrench here as opposed to a spanner, which is why I recommend using a spanner. It makes it easier. If that does end up happening, once you break the lock nut, just remove your strap and you'll be fine. Now you're going to want to twist your lock nut clockwise all the way until you have it free. Now you come over to your strap, unclip your strap, and take your lock nut off. There is a little spacer that fits in between our lock nut and our cone nut. If you can take the spacer off with a screwdriver, that is the most ideal thing to do, because if you look right there at the top, there is actually a notch, which is called a key. If that starts to turn wrong, it can basically make the whole situation of taking this cone off a lot harder. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here, we're going to turn this clockwise, and we're going to break it. Now, we're just going to use our hand, and we're simply going to turn until it's loose. So now that our cone nut is twisted all the way clockwise and it's now free, we're going to slip it off the crank arm. However, if we try to take this off, we're not going to be able to. We're going to have to go to the other side of the bike and take the chain guard off. The reason that we do leave the chain guard on up until this process is because of the chain ring teeth. I have a few scars on my body from these things. They can definitely bite you, so be careful. That's why I'm wearing gloves. Now the chain guard is extremely easy to take off. You can see there's one screw here, but we're actually going to have to go to the other side of the bike in order to do this. Now our first screw is right here, hiding in the chain ring. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take a pencil and we're actually going to make a circle around it. This is going to make sure that we can put our chain ring on the same way it came off. Our second chain guard screw is going to be hiding back here near the rear wheel, about halfway between the center of the wheel and the tire itself. We're going to do the same thing as we did before. We're going to make a circle around it. Trust me about those pencil marks. If you don't do it, what you may end up doing is putting your chain guard off just a little bit, because it can be slightly adjusted. And if it's off a little bit, the chain can rub and cling, and it's not so good. So we're going to take our Phillips and we're going to turn counterclockwise, and we're going to release our first screw here. Now we're going to come back to this screw that's hiding behind our chain ring, and we're going to take it off with a Phillips. Now our chain guard pops right off. And we're going to take our chain off by just simply rotating it around the chain ring and then looping it around our drive side pedal. The next step is to grab a hold of our ball bearing ring here. We want to take that out of the non-drive side to give us room and clearance in order to take the 3-piece crank out. And there you go. Congratulations, you've taken your bike apart. For this next step, you're going to want to take a Ziploc bag and you're going to want to drop the ball bearing rings, your cone, your spacer, and pretty much every part you've had taken off the bike so far, and you're going to want to drop them in a Ziploc bag. Now that you've got all your crankset parts in a bag, what you're going to do is you're going to take some simple green cleaner and you're going to spray it inside the bag. Just like that. Spray, spray, spray. And seal it up. I like to use these bags with the little handy little zipper on top. Now, get all the parts into one corner and just kind of agitate them around a little bit and get the cleaner all over them. You're going to want to let those parts just sit in the bag for about half an hour. For this part, what you're going to do is you're going to come over and you're going to spray your simple green right onto your crankset. And you're going to take a toothbrush and you're going to simply wipe all the grease off. This is going to take you a few minutes. So just keep on going. And make sure that you have something underneath you so that the simple green doesn't just spray onto the carpet. So for our parts inside the bag, I noticed I didn't use nearly enough cleaner. You're going to want to spray some more in there and just let them submerge in the cleaner. You can speed the process up a little bit by using a toothbrush, but if you do, you're going to end up getting the old grease and stuff all over you, and you're going to end up breathing in that cleaner, which may or may not give you a headache. I'd recommend just having them sit here focused in the corner with the cleaner for about half an hour. While our crankset parts are busy cleaning themselves, we're going to come over here, and remember we went ahead and toothbrushed this whole thing with some cleaner and we got all the old stuff off. So now we just wipe off the degreaser with the paper towel, and it should come out nice and sparkly and clean. So this is a perfect time to check our drive side lock ring, and I noticed mine was loose, which is part of the problem that I was having with this bike. This chain ring had a little play, and that's not supposed to happen. So what you do is you're going to need to take a very special tool here that's only for bicycles. It's called a 3-prong spanner, or a HCW-5, and you're going to place it inside the 3 grooves and simply tighten it. Now if you don't have this tool right here, what you could do is you could just take your crankset all by itself, not with the bicycle, to your local bike shop and just ask them to go ahead and tighten that lock ring on for you. They probably won't charge you any money at all, but you may want to put $1 in their tip jar, and they may even give you a pat on the back for being such an awesome do-it-yourselfer. And now that you're just simply waiting for your parts to be cleaned inside the bag, you're going to come over here and you're going to spray some simple green inside of the actual crankset cups themselves. You're going to do the front side, and then you're going to go around and do the other side back here too. So just like our parts in the bag, we're going to let our simple green cleaner do the work for us. Then we're going to come back in a little while and use a toothbrush to go around and clean it all up. Alright, now you're going to want to come over here and just kind of twist your parts around, shake them around just a little bit, and let them settle and sit a little differently so they get the whole thing nice and clean. Alright, now you want to come over here with your toothbrush and you want to get all this old dirty grease out of the cups. Just wipe it out. This is why you let the simple green sit in there for a little while, because it just comes right out. If you don't, man, you're going to sit here and you're going to scrub and scrub for several minutes. You see that? This side is already clean. We're going to go to the other side, and we're going to do the same thing over here to the other side. It just comes right out. I've let it sit in there for about 15 minutes. Okay, now that you've got your cups clean, you want to take a rag and you want to go around here and you want to get all that degreaser up. And actually stick it inside the bottom bracket itself and get that pool of degreaser that's just sitting right in there. Now you want to come back to the drive side and rub out all that old dirty grease. Now you've got fresh degreaser inside there now. What you want to do is you want to let that dry out for a little bit, because if you don't, if you put fresh grease in there, it'll start to work around and it'll start to eat away your fresh grease. So give it about half an hour, okay? And just to be on the safe side, you want to take a wet paper towel and wipe up the cups, just like that. Wipe that degreaser off and go ahead and do it on both sides, just like we did when we took out the old grease. Don't worry, the water's not going to be a hindrance or anything, because the grease we're using is actually going to be a really heavily water resistant grease. Alright, now our parts have been sitting there for quite a while. Feel free to agitate them and mess with them and shake them around a little bit more just for good measure, but they're pretty much ready to be washed out. You want to take them outside and you want to take them to the garden hose, and you want to wash out all that degreaser, and you're going to want to wash out all the parts. Try to keep them inside the bag so you don't drop them on the ground and they don't get a bunch of dirt in them and you don't lose anything. You might not want to take them to the kitchen sink though, because you might get in trouble. Now that you've got your parts nice and shiny and clean like this, you want to inspect them really well. You want to see if there's any grease still stuck in the bearing cage, but more importantly, you're looking for pitting, which are holes inside the bearings. Also do the same thing with this cone as well. Trace around your finger and look for pitting. Don't forget the cups. You want to go around with your finger. Take your gloves off at this point. It should be nice and clean. Okay? If your finger comes back dirty, you need to clean a little bit more. Check and see if you feel any pits. If you feel pitting, you're going to have to bang these cups out and replace them with new ones. I'll show you how to do that in a future video. Just because you have an older bike, it doesn't necessarily mean that your bearings are going to be pitted or they're going to be damaged in some way. The only way that really happens is if they're really, really in badly need of cleaning out and overhauling, and somebody rides them for, you know, dozens or hundreds of miles damaged like that, squeaking, creaking, and scraping and stuff, alright? So we're almost ready to apply fresh grease and put our bearings back inside of the cups. But before we do, we need to understand a little bit about them. First, we need to understand which way they need to go in. So if you look at these, they kind of resemble a little bit like a king's crown or a queen's crown, and that's how they're referred to. So what you want to do is you want to put the crown side, which is going to be the rounded side, not this flat side here. The crown side in, and you notice it fits perfectly in the cup. If you try and do it the other way, it still fits, but if you notice, the bearings are not actually going to engage with the cup. If you do it this way, you notice they do, and that's exactly what you do. So you put crown in the cup. So now that we know which way our bearings are going to go in, we're going to take our grease gun and we're going to apply some fresh grease along the cup, just like so. Okay, I like to use an old grocery bag like this and just kind of wipe inside the cup just like that. Try to keep as much grease as you can, but you want to smear it around. If you happen to notice my thumb in the last take and thought it was nail polish, well, it's not. It's from actually smacking my thumb while I was working on a fence. And we're going to come over and do the exact same thing. Spread some grease with the grease gun, and then take the old grocery bag and spread it around. Now we take our ball bearings, remember, crown side in the cup, and we simply pop them in place. And don't forget about the back side, remember, crown in the cup, pop in place. And when you're doing this, you want to try to make sure that your ball bearing cage and your bearings don't fall out and hit the ground and get a bunch of dirt in them. So now what you want to do is apply some grease onto your drive side lock ring. Just get it all the way around. Don't bother spreading it with the bag like you did before. And then do the same thing with the non-drive side lock ring. Just spread grease all the way around it. Okay, here comes one of the tricky parts. What you're going to do is you're going to start from the drive side. You're going to have your crank in your hand. You're going to go through and try to press it through. And as you do, go ahead and hold the non-drive side bearing in place, because sometimes you have a tendency to press it out with the crank arm. Alright, now you want to take the non-drive side lock ring, and the greasy side goes in first. So slip it around, down, and begin to tighten. Remember which way you're tightening it, okay? You're going to go counterclockwise to actually tighten this, because remember, it's reverse threaded. And when you're doing this, try to feel it out, you know? Kind of go a little slow and try to feel until it starts on its own. It should start real nice and easy. You don't want to have to force it or possibly cross-thread it. And then just keep on tightening it until your crank set comes back together. So at this point you should have two parts left. The spacer, which goes in first, and then our very first lock ring, or our outer lock ring for our non-drive side. This is the very first part that we took off after securing our pedals and taking off our pedal, okay? Remember, this spacer has a little notch or a key on top of it. So what you want to do is you want to actually look at your crank, and you're going to look for a groove. And when you find that groove, that is where it goes. If you can't quite see it, or you're at an awkward angle filming a YouTube video like I am, you can kind of just rotate a little bit until you feel it. And then as soon as you find it, it'll slide right on, okay? So now we're putting on our last part. The silver side, or the part where you see wear, is actually going to be the side that goes in, okay? So just slide it down the crank arm, and then go ahead and tighten it. Which way? That's right, counterclockwise, because this is still reverse threaded. And remember, just like the last one, don't force it, but slowly find it until you've got it just right, because you don't want to cross thread it, okay? Okay, so what you should be looking at is first the cone nut to secure it, then the spacer, and then finally the lock nut, okay? We've gone around to the other side of the bike because we're going to have to do some work on the pedal now. So now we need to put our pedal back on. We're going to take our grease gun and we're going to apply a small amount of grease on our pedal. So we're still on the non-drive side of the bike, and we're going to take our pedal and we're going to put it inside the bike. And we're going to turn it counterclockwise to tighten it, because this entire side is actually reverse threaded. Just remember that. The non-drive side is all reverse threaded, okay? The next thing we need to do is to take our strap, put it around our seat tube, and actually snap our strap back into place to secure our crank arm. So we need to take our pedal wrench again, locate our groove, and actually tighten it on back again. Remember to use your left hand to grab the drive side pedal to secure it. Once you've got it nice and secure, you're good to go. Our next step is to remove our strap. So this is the part that separates a mechanic from a good mechanic. If you notice, there's a small amount of play as I rock back and forth. It might spin quite well, but that's not all that we're going for. We have to take all that play out. So I'm coming back and I'm finessing it just a little bit, just to make sure I've got it as perfect as it can possibly be. So you want to notice the point where it begins to play and try to back it off from that point just the slightest amount that you possibly can. Remember, when you tighten this second lock nut, it is going to compress it just ever so slightly. So it's going to be just a little harder than it looks. And in the final turn, we're going to grab the inner nut and the outer nut and just lock them together. And that is how you overhaul a crankset. So we're not quite done yet. Remember, we still have to take our chain and put it around our chain ring. Watch your fingers here. This is why I'm wearing gloves. When you rotate it around, you don't want your thumb to be in there. So our next step is to place our chain guard on, like so. And we're going to take our screws and place them on our screwdriver and try to observe the circles that we made before. And I usually will put this rear one on first because that one hiding behind the chainring is much more difficult to actually put on. So just try to line it up with your circle, just like you did. Okay, now we come over here and our chainring is a little in the way, so we're going to rotate it. Remember, the chain guard goes between the chainring and the frame because the threads which actually lock the screw into place are in the frame. They're not actually in the chain guard itself. Okay, and we're going to observe our circle that we made with our pencil. Come back over here and give that a little bit of a loose feel to it. And try to get it right in our circle again. Boy, it really has a tendency to want to walk itself up when you tighten this first one. Okay, now you want to pedal the bike and make sure you don't have any chain rub. If you do, then you want to finesse the chain guard just a little bit and keep going until you find complete clearance and no harsh sounds or anything like that. So we've got a nice, easy to pedal, buttery smooth crankset with no play. We had lots of play before, so we're ready for the next part of this bike. If you enjoyed the video and you learned something, please press the like button, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to push the bell notification below so you can be notified when we work on the next piece, the headset.